never corrected them when they assumed I was struggling. I never mentioned that the modest apartment I lived in was paid off 20 years ago, or that the 3 medical clinics bearing my name generated over $500,000 annually. When my daughter Emily introduced me to David and his family as my mom, Sarah, who works at County General Hospital, I simply smiled and nodded. She wasn't lying. I did work there. She just didn't know I also owned the private practice down the street, along with 2 other locations across the city. Why didn't I tell her? That's a question I've asked myself many times over the past 30 years. The answer goes back to my own mother, who inherited money from my grandfather and spent it on me without teaching me its value. By the time I was 25, I was entitled, spoiled, and completely unprepared for real life. When I lost my husband to cancer, when Emily was only 3, I had to rebuild everything from scratch. I went back to school, became a nurse, then pushed myself through medical school while working nights. Every step was hard-earned, and I wanted Emily to know that same hunger, that same drive. So when she graduated medical school last year and started her residency, she had no idea that I could have paid off her student loans with a single check. She lived in a small apartment, budgeted carefully, took extra shifts. She was proud of her independence, and I was proud of who she'd become. Then she met David Park. He was a corporate attorney at his family's law firm, Park & Associates. Old money, established name, the kind of family that summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. When Emily brought him to meet me at my apartment last Christmas, I could see the slight surprise in his eyes as he took in my modest living room with its 20-year-old furniture and walls decorated with Emily's childhood artwork. But he was polite, charming even, and he clearly adored my daughter. "Your mom seems really sweet," I overheard him tell Emily as they left that evening. "Very humble." I smiled to myself. Humble. That was one word for it. 3 months later, David proposed. Emily called me at work, crying happy tears, and I felt genuine joy for her. David seemed like a good man, and more importantly, I could see how he looked at her, like she was the most precious thing in his world. "His parents want to meet you properly," Emily said a week later. "They've invited us to their estate for the weekend. Mom, it's this beautiful property in the countryside. They want to get to know you better before the wedding." Something in her tone made me pause. "That sounds lovely, honey, but why do I sense you're nervous?" She hesitated. "They're just very formal, very traditional. His mother, Catherine, is really particular about things. I just want everything to go well." "It will," I assured her. "I'll be on my best behavior." What I didn't tell her was that I'd already done my research. A few phone calls to colleagues who moved in those circles, and I had a complete picture of Thomas and Catherine Park. Old Philadelphia money, 3 generations of attorneys, members of every exclusive club that mattered, the kind of people who valued pedigree and connections, who measured worth in alma maters and trust funds. I packed for the weekend carefully, not my designer suits that hung in the back of my closet, the ones I wore to medical conferences and board meetings. Instead, I chose simple clothes, my everyday wear, comfortable jeans, a plain cotton blouse, practical flats. My good watch stayed home. I wore the Timex I'd bought 15 years ago. Emily picked me up Friday evening in David's car, a luxury sedan that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. "You look nice, Mom," she said, though I caught the slight worry in her eyes as she glanced at my outfit. "Thank you, honey. This is comfortable for a long drive." The Park estate was exactly what I'd expected. A sprawling colonial mansion set on 50 acres of manicured grounds with a circular driveway and literal columns flanking the entrance. A housekeeper answered the door and led us through a foyer that could have fit my entire apartment. Catherine Park was waiting in the sitting room, a tall woman in her early 60s, with silver hair styled in a perfect bob and pearls that were definitely real. Thomas stood when we entered, distinguished in his pressed khakis and polo shirt, the kind of casual that cost $500. "Sarah," Catherine said, extending a hand rather than offering a hug. Her eyes swept over me quickly, taking inventory. I watched her gaze linger on my shoes, my bag, my bare wrist where an expensive watch should be. "How wonderful to finally meet you. Emily speaks so highly of you." "The pleasure is mine," I replied warmly. "Thank you for inviting me to your beautiful home." "Of course. David's fiancée's mother deserves our hospitality." She emphasized the word deserves just slightly, as if it were a favor rather than a given. Let me show you to your room. I'm sure you're tired from the drive." She led us upstairs, past several closed doors with elaborate wreaths and nameplate signs. We passed what was clearly the master suite, then a spacious guest room with a 4-poster bed, then another guest room with a lake view. Finally, at the end of the hall, she opened a door to a small room with a single bed and a window overlooking the garage. "This should suit you nicely," Catherine said. "It's cozy and quiet. The bathroom is just down the hall, shared with the housekeeper's quarters." Emily's face flushed. "Catherine, I thought Mom would be in the blue guest room. The one you mentioned had the—" "Oh, that room is being prepared for David's colleague from Yale who's joining us tomorrow," Catherine interrupted smoothly. "I'm sure your mother doesn't mind. After all, I imagine she's used to modest accommodations. Aren't you, Sarah?" I saw Emily open her mouth to protest, saw the embarrassment and anger in her eyes. I also saw Catherine watching me carefully, testing. "This is perfect," I said, setting my bag on the bed. "I appreciate the quiet. Hospital shifts taught me to sleep anywhere." I smiled at Catherine. "Thank you for thinking of my comfort." Something flickered in Catherine's eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or perhaps disappointment that I hadn't objected. Dinner that evening was served in a formal dining room with china that probably cost more than my car. David's father Thomas held court at the head of the table, discussing the firm's recent cases. Catherine peppered the conversation with names of people I was clearly supposed to recognize, references to clubs and charities and social events. "Sarah, what did you say you do at County General?" Thomas asked, cutting into his steak. "I work in the medical ward," I replied truthfully. I did work there, volunteering 1 day a week in the clinic for uninsured patients. "How admirable," Catherine said. "Public service is so important. And how long have you been in healthcare?" "About 30 years now." 30 years, she repeated. "Still at County General? No advancement?" "Mom's being modest," Emily interjected quickly. "She's incredible at what she does. Her patients love her." "I'm sure they do," Thomas said, but his tone suggested this was the most he'd expected of me. It takes a certain kind of person to work with that population. Not everyone has the stomach for it. I took a sip of water and said nothing. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We were so pleased when David told us Emily was in medicine," Catherine continued. "Such a respectable profession for a young woman, and to accomplish it without the advantages some people have. You must be very proud, Sarah." "I am," I said simply. "It must have been difficult, raising her alone on a nurse's salary." Catherine's voice dripped with sympathy. "I can't imagine the sacrifices you had to make." "Every parent makes sacrifices for their children." "Yes, but some more than others." She patted my hand condescendingly. "You've done remarkably well, all things considered. Emily is a credit to you." I watched Emily's jaw tighten. David looked down at his plate. After dinner, Thomas invited David to his study to discuss wedding details, what he called the practical matters. Emily and I were left with Catherine in the sitting room. "I thought we might have some girl talk," Catherine said, pouring tea from a silver service. "Just us ladies." Emily sat beside me on the sofa, her hand finding mine. "Emily," Catherine began, "David tells us you're living in that little apartment in the city, near the hospital, isn't it?" "Yes, it's convenient for my residency." "Well, Thomas and I have been discussing it, and we'd like to help you find something more suitable. Something in a better neighborhood. Perhaps a condo in the new development near the firm. We know the developer." "That's generous," Emily said carefully, "but I'm managing fine where I am." "Of course you are, dear, but you shouldn't have to merely manage. You're going to be a park soon." Catherine smiled. "And naturally, we want to make sure you're settled independently, away from any potential obligations." "Obligations?" Emily frowned. Catherine glanced at me, then back at Emily. "Well, dear, we know how difficult it can be when family members become dependent. My own mother went into an excellent assisted living facility at your mother's age. It gave her such peace of mind, and gave me the freedom to focus on my own family." "My mother isn't even 60 yet," Emily said, her voice sharp. No, of course not. I just meant, well, in the future, when the time comes. These are things to think about. County General doesn't offer much of a pension, I imagine. And living in the city on a fixed income." Catherine shook her head sympathetically. We just want Emily to know she doesn't have to worry about supporting you. Thomas and I can help arrange something comfortable when the time comes." I felt Emily's hand tighten around mine. I squeezed back gently. "That's very thoughtful of you to think ahead," I said calmly. "But I'm quite capable of taking care of myself." "I'm sure you think so," Catherine replied. "But at a certain age, we all need help. Pride can be such a burden, don't you think?" Saturday morning, I woke early and came downstairs to find breakfast being prepared. Catherine was directing the housekeeper, a woman about my age named Maria. "Oh, Sarah, you're up," Catherine said. "I hope you slept well in your little room." "Very well, thank you." "Wonderful." "Maria is making breakfast, but I thought, since you're used to working with your hands, you might enjoy helping in the kitchen. I'm sure it would feel more comfortable than sitting idle." Maria glanced at me apologetically. I smiled at her. "I'd be happy to help," I said. "What can I do?" For the next hour, I chopped vegetables and helped Maria prepare food while Catherine supervised and made small talk. She asked about my apartment, my work schedule, whether I had any hobbies I could afford. Each question felt like a gentle probe, cataloging my limitations. When breakfast was served, Thomas announced they were planning a round of golf. "David, you're joining me, of course. And Emily, Catherine arranged a tennis game for you at the club with some of the other young attorneys' wives. You'll want to get to know them." "What about Mom?" Emily asked. Thomas looked surprised, as if he'd forgotten I was there. "Oh, well, Sarah, you're welcome to relax here. We have books in the library, or you could take a walk around the grounds. I'm sure you don't play golf." "Actually, I started. Mom learned to play years ago," Emily said quickly. "She's quite good." "Is that so?" Thomas looked skeptical. "Well, the club has a strict membership policy. Guests need to be sponsored by a member. Perhaps another time." "Of course," I said. "A walk sounds lovely." I watched Emily's face throughout this exchange. She was angry, I could see it, but also torn. She was trying to keep the peace, trying to make this weekend work. She caught my eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I shook my head slightly. Everything was going exactly as I'd expected. That afternoon, while they were all out, I did walk the grounds. It was a beautiful property, I had to admit. Well-maintained gardens, a small lake, a gazebo. The kind of place that required a staff to manage. I thought about the clinic I'd built from nothing, the patients whose lives we'd changed, the young doctors I'd mentored. This was a different kind of wealth, and I wondered if they understood the difference. That evening, as we gathered for cocktails before dinner, Thomas made an announcement. "Sarah, Catherine and I have been discussing something, and we wanted to talk to you before we mention it to the kids." Emily and David exchanged glances. "As you know, David and Emily are planning their wedding for next spring," Thomas continued. "And naturally there are significant expenses involved. Catherine and I are happy to cover the wedding itself, of course. That's our gift to them." "That's very generous," I said. "We've also discussed helping them with a house, a proper start to their marriage. There's a property in our neighborhood coming on the market, and we think it would be perfect for them." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, wondering where this was going. Thomas cleared his throat. "We know that traditionally both families contribute to these milestones, and we certainly don't want you to feel obligated or embarrassed by any financial disparity." "Dad, you don't need to," David started. Thomas held up his hand. "Let me finish. Sarah, we understand your situation. Years of hard work, living modestly to put Emily through school. You've done an admirable job, truly. But we don't want you to feel any pressure to contribute beyond your means." Catherine stepped forward with an envelope, "So we've put together a little something. Think of it as a thank you for raising such a wonderful daughter. It should help with your own future security, maybe allow you to retire a bit earlier, enjoy life a little." She held out the envelope to me. I didn't take it. "What is that?" Emily asked quietly. "It's just a small gift," Catherine said. $50,000. We thought Sarah could use it for her retirement fund, or perhaps to relocate somewhere more affordable, somewhere quieter, with a lower cost of living." The room went very quiet. "Let me make sure I understand," Emily said, her voice dangerously calm. "You're giving my mother money to—" "What? Go away?" "Don't be dramatic, dear," Catherine said. "We're simply ensuring she's taken care of." That way you won't have to worry about supporting her, and you can focus on your marriage and your career. You think my mother needs your charity?" Emily's voice was rising now. "Emily," I said softly. "No, Mom, no," she turned to David. "Did you know about this?" David looked genuinely shocked. I had no idea. "Dad, what the hell?" "Don't take that tone with me," Thomas said. "We're being practical. Your mother-in-law works at a public hospital. She lives in a one-bedroom apartment. She drove here in a car that's at least 10 years old. We're trying to help." "Help?" Emily laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've spent the entire weekend treating her like she's beneath you. The tiny room, the comments about public hospitals, suggesting she help in the kitchen, and now you're trying to pay her to stay out of our lives?" "We're ensuring everyone knows their place," Catherine said, her voice cooling. "This is how these things work, Emily. David comes from a certain background. We have standards to maintain." "Standards?" Emily stood up. "Let me tell you about standards." "Emily," I said again, standing now too, "it's all right." "It's not all right, Mom. They've been disrespecting you all weekend, and I've been a coward for not saying something sooner." She turned to Catherine and Thomas. "Do you want to know where my mother really works?" "Emily, don't," David said, looking confused. "My mother doesn't just work at County General. She volunteers there 1 day a week because she believes everyone deserves quality health care, regardless of their ability to pay." Emily's voice was shaking. "The rest of the week, she runs her own medical practice. Actually, 3 practices. She's Dr. Sarah Chen, MD. She employs 15 doctors and has over 30 staff members." Catherine's face went pale. "And that apartment you've been so concerned about?" Emily continued. "She bought it with cash 30 years ago. She could buy a mansion tomorrow if she wanted one. She just doesn't care about impressing people." Thomas sat down heavily. "I don't understand." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, turning the screen to show them. "Your $50,000 gift is very thoughtful," I said quietly. "But I think I'll match it and donate $100,000 to a medical scholarship fund. Would you prefer I make it in your name or Emily and David's?" I pulled out my checkbook from my purse. Yes, I still use checks. I wrote one out slowly, the scratch of pen on paper the only sound in the room. $100,000, I said, holding it up, to the Philadelphia Medical Scholarship Fund, for students from underserved communities who want to become doctors. I set it on the coffee table, then pulled out a business card. "That's my office number. My assistant can arrange the details of the donation." Catherine stared at the card. "Chen Medical Group. You own." 3 clinics, yes. We specialize in family medicine and internal medicine. We serve about 5,000 patients across our locations. I turned to Thomas. "I actually considered joining your golf club years ago. Dr. Morrison is a member. Do you know him? He offered to sponsor me, but I decided I'd rather spend my membership dues on something more meaningful." David had his head in his hands. "Oh my God. Why didn't you tell us?" Thomas asked, and for the first time, he sounded less arrogant and more genuinely confused. "You didn't ask," I said simply. "You saw what you expected to see. A woman in simple clothes, driving an old car, living modestly. You assumed that meant I had nothing. You never considered that it might mean I simply have different priorities." I looked at Catherine. "My mother gave me everything growing up. Every expensive thing I wanted, every luxury, every privilege. And you know what it taught me? Nothing. Nothing except entitlement. When I had to start over after my husband died, I had no skills, no work ethic, no understanding of the value of money. I had to learn it all from scratch." I turned to Emily, who had tears running down her face. "I never told you about the practices because I wanted you to build your own life, to know what it felt like to work for something, to budget, to struggle a little. Not because I didn't trust you with money, but because I trusted you to become someone who understood its real value. And you did. You became exactly the woman I hoped you'd be." "Mom," Emily whispered. "But I also wanted to see something else this weekend," I continued, looking back at Catherine and Thomas. "I wanted to see how you treated someone you thought had nothing to offer you. Someone who couldn't advance your social standing or add to your wealth or impress your friends at the club." "This was a test," Catherine said slowly. "Life is a test," I replied. "Every interaction, every moment, we show who we really are. You failed it this weekend, not because you have money and I pretended not to, but because you treated me as less than human because you thought I didn't." Thomas cleared his throat. We didn't mean." "You did mean it," I said, not unkindly. "You meant every word, every assumption, every condescending comment, because you genuinely believe that wealth determines worth. That designer clothes matter more than character. That a country club membership says more about a person than how they treat others." I picked up the envelope Catherine had offered me and held it out to her. "I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. What I need is for you to understand that my daughter deserves respect. Not because she's marrying into your family, not because she's a doctor, but because she's a human being who has worked hard for everything she has." Emily came to stand beside me, taking my hand. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said. "I should have said something the moment they put you in that tiny room. I should have defended you." "You defended me when it mattered," I told her. "You found your voice. That's what I needed to see, too." David stood up, walking over to his parents. "I'm ashamed of you both. I'm ashamed that I didn't see what was happening until Emily spelled it out. But I see it now." He turned to me. "Dr. Chen, Sarah, I owe you an apology. My parents raised me with privileges, but they clearly forgot to teach me some important lessons about respect and dignity." "David, don't be ridiculous," Catherine started. "No, Mom. This is exactly what Sarah, Dr. Chen, is talking about. You treated her like she was worthless because she didn't fit your image of success. You tried to buy her off like she was an embarrassment. How is that any different from the classism and snobbery you always claimed to be above?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're right, Sarah. I apologize. We've been inexcusably rude. I can't claim ignorance as an excuse. I knew better. I just didn't do better." "Why should we apologize?" Catherine asked. "She deceived us. She let us believe." "She let us reveal ourselves," Thomas interrupted his wife. "She held up a mirror, and we didn't like what we saw." He looked at me. "I'm 65 years old, and I just learned a lesson I should have known at 6. I'm sorry." I nodded. "Apology accepted. But understand something. I didn't do this to humiliate you or to prove I'm better than you. I did it because I needed to know who would be part of my daughter's life. Whether the man she loves comes from a family that values what truly matters." "And?" David asked quietly. "And I see a young man who's capable of growth, who can admit when he's wrong, who loves my daughter enough to stand up to his parents." I smiled at him. "That's a good start." Catherine sat down, looking shaken. "I don't know what to say." "You could start with whether you can respect Emily for who she is, not for what her last name will be," I suggested. "Whether you can see people as people, not as positions on a social ladder." There was a long silence. Then Catherine said, "I was raised to believe that certain things mattered. The right schools, the right connections, the right address. It's all I've ever known." "Then maybe it's time to know something else," I said gently. "Maybe it's time to learn what your son is starting to understand, that the best things in life can't be bought or inherited. They have to be earned through how we treat others." Emily wiped her eyes. "So what happens now?" I looked at the 5 of us, standing in this grand room filled with expensive things. "That depends. David, can you love Emily for who she is, not for who your parents want her to be?" "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. "Emily, can you love him, even knowing his family's values are different from ours?" "Yes," she said, "but only if they can respect us both." I turned to Thomas and Catherine. "And can you two learn to measure people by their character instead of their bank accounts?" Thomas answered first. "I'd like to try. I'd like a chance to prove I can be better than I've been this weekend." Catherine was slower to respond, but finally she said, "I don't know if I can change everything I've been taught to believe, but I can try to be more aware, more considerate." She looked at Emily. "I do want you in our family. I just wanted you to fit into the family I knew. I can see now that was wrong." "It's a start," I said. 6 months later, I attended Emily and David's engagement party at the Park Estate. This time, when I arrived, Catherine greeted me at the door with a genuine smile. She'd put me in the best guest room, the one with the lake view. The party was beautiful, understated, elegant. About halfway through, Catherine pulled me aside. "I want to show you something." she said. She led me to her study and pulled out a folder. Inside were brochures for volunteer programs at medical clinics in underserved areas. I've been volunteering at County General, she said. 2 days a month. I'm not a doctor or a nurse, but I can help with administrative work, patient intake, that sort of thing. She looked almost shy. Maria, our housekeeper, she introduced me to it. She volunteers there too. I never knew. I never asked. Catherine, I said, genuinely moved. I'm not telling you this to earn praise, she said quickly. I'm telling you because I want you to know I'm trying. I'm trying to understand what you were trying to teach me that weekend. She paused. And I want to say thank you. That was the hardest and most valuable lesson anyone has ever given me. At the party, I watched David and Emily move through the crowd. They were happy, genuinely happy, and they moved as equals. David deferred to Emily's opinions, supported her career, treated her family with respect. Thomas found me near the end of the evening. Sarah, I've been meaning to ask you something. The scholarship fund we donated to? The one you matched our contribution to? Yes? Would you be willing to serve on the board with me? Help select the recipients? I think I could learn a lot from your perspective. I smiled. I'd be honored. As I drove home that night in my old car, heading back to my modest apartment, I thought about the weekend that had tested all of us. Some tests are meant to expose people's worst qualities so you can avoid them. But the best tests are the ones that reveal the possibility for growth, the capacity for change, the potential for people to become better than they were. I never told Emily to call off the wedding. I never demanded that David's family meet some standard of perfection. Because I understood something that weekend that I tried to teach them. We're all works in progress. We all have moments when we fail to be our best selves. The question isn't whether we make mistakes. The question is whether we're willing to learn from them. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it doesn't buy character either. Character is built through choices, through how we treat others when we think no one important is watching, through whether we can admit when we're wrong and do better. I went to my daughter's wedding the following spring, wearing a beautiful dress from my collection. Catherine complimented it sincerely. When she asked where I'd gotten it, I told her. We talked about fashion and medicine and the volunteers at County General, and I saw in her eyes a woman who was trying to be better than she'd been. That's all any of us can do. Try to be better. Try to see people for who they are, not for what we want them to be. Try to measure worth by character, not by possessions. And sometimes it takes a test to help people see that. Not a test to punish them for failing, but a test to show them they have the capacity to pass if they're willing to try.